On November 13th, Sports Illustrated published an article about a simple topic: tennis. The article stated the last 2017 tennis tournament was being held in London, a place that had been voted world's most powerful global city for the past 6 years. Now, you wouldn't think tennis would be a topic of globalization. In a small town like Springfield, Missouri, we are home to the Springfield Lasers, our very own professional tennis team housed in our own backyard. They travel all over the U.S., but what would happen if they started taking their rackets overseas? For my formal report, I chose to write about globalization. It's hard to look past it when you read the news. The Disney company just celebrated its 25th anniversary for Disneyland Paris, and according to their website, McDonald's does business in more than 100 countries around the world. So why are there so many mixed feelings about it? In my report, I have found there to be more benefits and positives than negatives in globalization and outsourcing. But before I get into the pros and cons, I want to briefly discuss the history of globalization. Now, this is not a new concept. Countries have been trading and using each other for resources since mankind has walked the earth. Tribes would use each other for other resources, and ancient cultures would send goods back and forth. To thrive, a country must import as many resources as possible to flourish and rise to power. And what has trading led to? Developing businesses overseas. I want to first go over 3 points identifying the arguments against globalization, and then I will explain the research I found that outweigh these. The first point made against globalization is that outsourcing exaggerates power. The theory is that when a CEO takes his business overseas, he becomes even more powerful than he already is. In the Indiana Journal of Global Studies, an article was published saying that by doing business overseas, new power finds newfound ways to influence others, and that this may not always be used for good. The second point is that by outsourcing, corporations are taking away jobs in the country they were founded in, thus weakening that home country's economy. In 2003, the Journal of Public Affairs published an article saying that in order to be successful, businesses must be careful to spread their wealth and resources equally among nations, and that the middle class cannot survive if done so improperly. The final point is that only those already wealthy have the means to expand that wealth by opening up businesses overseas, thus becoming even more wealthy and widening that gap. So in sum, globalization exaggerates power, weakens the home country's economy, and widens the wealth gap. Some of these may indeed be initially correct, but if you let globalization flourish, the benefits far outweigh the negatives. Since I started talking about increasing power, that's the argument I will first identify. Initially, yes, some power may be exaggerated overseas, but as more business and ideas flow freely from country to country, the significance of a single powerful entity, whether a CEO or a president of a country, becomes more and more obsolete. When trade is as frequent as it is today, it lessens the authority of any one national government, especially if that trade is universal. One CEO might gain slightly more profit than before cracking into new markets, but that doesn't mean there aren't other opportunities for other CEOs to do the exact same thing. Okay, but what about taking jobs in a home country? Again, initially, that is what it could look like on the surface. But in reality, taking businesses overseas generates that company's profits, thus creating a greater economy within that country it is based. Plus, as businesses establish themselves in other countries, new opportunities arise for citizens in those countries to learn new skills. By reaching a new environment and culture, companies are giving their employees an outlet for developing new ideas. In doing so, they are enhancing their company by creating a more diverse workplace that could thereby increase the flux of product and company morale. But besides a greater global knowledge, taking business overseas could also potentially increase that company's efficiency. In the Journal of Developing Areas, an article was published stating rapid advances in communication and transport technologies have enabled production to be broken up into different stages and to be carried out on the basis of economies of geographical diversification. If businesses can be broken up into stages because another country offers them that opportunity, then the company can increase the products it makes in a shorter amount of time, generating more for consumers to purchase. But what about the cost of it all? Some arguments against globalization address the costly additions required to spread business overseas. But some businesses have already found this to not be the case. According to a report done on Baskin-Robbins, the company never wanted to expand overseas, but did so to drive down manufacturing costs. In fact, the report, written just 5 years ago, stated that getting out of manufacturing is the one way to drive down costs by shifting labor cost decisions to third-party suppliers. Granted, this is the world's biggest chain of ice cream stores, but they were looking to save on profits and turn to globalization to do so. According to the article, Baskin-Robbins decided to shut down its production facility in Peterborough, Ontario, and lay off 80 workers because of increased demand. Even though business was up, they weren't looking to expand their stores into other countries, but decided to use these countries to further their sales. When a business looks to other countries for lower production costs, it can produce more and serve more people, therefore driving its profit skyward. Instead of costing the business more, it can reduce its expenditures on necessary items and actions. There will also be two sides to every story. One person working a white-collar job will blame globalization for being laid off, and a CEO of a company will attribute their newfound success overseas to the changing of times. Each story and perspective is different. For the purpose of this speech, I make the recommendation that outsourcing and globalization are improving the world more than they are harming it. Taking the business and economics out of the equation, globalization and outsourcing offer so much more to the people that really need it. Leaving the fact aside that they are providing jobs to underdeveloped nations, the two business ideas are also diversifying the world, bringing opportunity to people who can then make a living for themselves. By outsourcing, companies are expanding their workplace environment to other cultures and giving their employees accustomed to working with other people. In turn, these new people, especially those in third world countries, are learning a trade that might not have otherwise been available to them had companies not reached out. While the social aspect is definitely strong, considering these benefits without acknowledging the business sector is like commenting on the taste of an orange without pointing at the juice. If businesses were confined to only selling to their home countries, our world and its economy would have plateaued long ago. With globalization and outsourcing, companies are looking to the future and creating larger, stronger corporations that will only strengthen and unite the countries it involves.